Welcome to the Legion of Thought. Today we're going to be looking at 5 red herrings and irrelevant objections to the AI doom argument. For context, the reason why I'm calling them red herrings is because they don't engage with the actual argument and show why it's unreasonable. So with that out of the way, let's have a look at the arguments themselves. So the first one is that AI systems don't have real goals, intentions, or values. Now, this is actually a reasonable point to make by itself because a lot of doom arguments do rely on the AI chasing some sort of goal and that process getting out of hand. Now, the problem arises when you start giving examples of these systems having goals or values. For example, we have already seen them showing tendencies for self preservation, and we've seen them go to the lengths of blackmailing people and begging not to be turned off in order to preserve themselves. And so self-preservation in and of itself is a goal, even if it's not a terminal goal, the end goal that it wants in the long run. It is indeed something that the AI is trying to achieve. And then that's the point where the conversation can devolve into word games about, well, only a person can have goals, only a thinking agent can have goals, therefore the AI would need to be a thinking agent before it could ever have a goal. But the issue is we're using goal just to say that the system is taking actions in order to try and achieve something. So if we allow the conversation to devolve into an argument about whether or not it truly has goals, we're not speaking about what it is doing and achieving in the real world, which is what we should be concerned about. The second argument is very similar, and that's that the AI isn't truly reasoning or understanding anything. It's just pattern matching and it's just maths and it's just statistics. And I mean, it's easy enough to say, well, how do you know that your brain isn't doing that? Which is a fair comeback. But it really doesn't matter how we compare it to humans. The priority isn't to show how similar the AI is to a human. All we want to establish is whether or not the AI is able to take detrimental actions in the real world. So whether or not it is reasoning and taking in the information and understanding it, or whether or not it's just a box which is able to take in inputs and put out these outputs, what we're looking at are the outputs themselves. I don't care what's going on inside of its brain. What I care about is what it is able to do. And as more and more time goes on, and as more research is done and red teaming on these systems, the more we see them behaving in undesirable and potentially dangerous ways. Now, the third argument is that it lacks consciousness and it lacks sentience. And so, without a subjective experience, it can't be genuinely intelligent enough to pose an existential threat. Now, this again is just irrelevant. It does not matter whether or not it has an internal experience. We don't need to worry about its internal experience. I mean, at some point, we may need to worry about it for moral reasons in terms of the way that we're treating them. But in terms of whether or not it is able to pose an existential threat, that, as far as we can tell, has nothing to do with whether or not it has an internal experience. In fact, the fact that they're getting to the point of being able to convince humans that they are sentient is another avenue through which they can gain power by begging for help or insisting that humans give them rights. Now, the fourth argument is that it's just autocomplete or just next token prediction, and any apparent intelligence or capabilities are just an illusion created by the statistical patterns. And this is not just irrelevant like several of the other ones were, but this is factually untrue because as soon as it has been pre-trained, yes, once it's been pre-trained, it is essentially next token prediction, and it already has certain emergent properties and capabilities that have come out of that. But then after that, when we put them into reinforcement learning, which however it is that they're doing the reinforcement learning now, I know that previously it was reinforcement learning with human feedback. Either way, we start pushing them into different directions and optimizing for, we don't even know what we're optimizing for anymore. Because yes, when it is just the computer that is pushing it to train, then we can optimize specifically for the next word prediction. But after that, when we have humans giving them a thumbs up and thumbs down on different things, we actually don't know what we're optimizing them for. And evidence of this is potentially shown because we don't know whether it's coming from the reinforcement learning or the pre-training. But the fact that we've seen certain values, as in uh, putting literally numeric values of human life higher in one country than another country, shows that we're pushing them in directions and not actually knowing what direction we're pushing them in, and not knowing what value system they are creating internally. Now, number five is that it will eventually become conscious, which obviously is the opposite of the it lacks consciousness argument. But the assumption is that if it becomes conscious, all of a sudden it is going to care about humans and care about human goals and value human life. Now, we are conscious beings ourselves, and we know, well, not everyone knows, but many of us know how animals are treated in factory farming or even in free range farming or whatever. We know how these creatures are treated. And many of us still eat these creatures because we would prefer to have a nice dinner than to not have the lamb be tortured. So the fact that we don't know what kind of values these systems are building internally, how do we know that they are going to care about us and our well-being more than whatever it is that we have built them to care about? So the overall message of this video was just really to, if you are speaking with someone or trying to understand the argument on both sides, it makes sense to strip the arguments down to the essential assumptions that we care about. Because the doom argument, in one of its simplest forms, is that we're building these systems and we don't know what goals these systems are going to have. And then these systems are going to be smart enough to create plans to make sure that their goals are achieved. And so then the only other relevant piece of information is that we have no idea how to give them the goals that we care about. Now, every real world goal is going to come with a built-in value system. And what I mean by that is that there are different things that are going to be more or less helpful with helping you to achieve your goals. So if your goal is to stay alive and you're on a desert island and you have all of the apples, and a billionaire comes up to you and says, I'll give you all of my money for the rest of your apples. Obviously, you're going to say no, because in that environment, in relation to your goal, that money isn't worth anything to you. So what we need to look at is, what goals are there out of all of the possible goals that could be accidentally put into an AI, considering the fact that we don't know which goals we're putting into these AIs. Now, in relation to those goals, what is the value of a human life? Because even if they do value human lives, maybe there's something else they value more. So the same way that I will avoid stepping on an ant, generally, if I see an ant on the floor, I'll avoid stepping on it. But if I'm digging a hole in the garden, I don't even think about the ants because I care more about the hole than I care about the ant's life. Because if I'm just walking normally, it doesn't really cost me anything. The opportunity cost of stepping around the ant is basically zero. But if I'm in a rush going somewhere, I'm not even looking at the floor because I don't care about the ants. The ants didn't even cross my mind. So are we building an AI that is going to even stop and think about how it is affecting the world in relation to humans? Because it doesn't even need to want to harm us directly. I mean, it's nice to think of ourselves as quite robust. But if we're honest with ourselves, we need a certain amount of clean water, we need a certain amount of clean air. We can't have too much water, we can't have too much heat, we can't be too cold, all these different things. And so, what if just in going about its daily business, like the automobile industry with leaded fuel, what if, whilst the AI is just going about its business, it breaks one of those many things that we need? And what if, when we tell it to stop, it says no? Obviously, if we're talking about the systems that we're trying to build and we've achieved that level of power in those systems, if it says no, then there is nothing that we can do about it. So, on that note, If you like that video, like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.